Hello, good afternoon in Dublin. Good morning and good evening. I know we have students from all over the world today joining us. A little bit of confusion with the time zone, but I think everyone you'll be able to join us here or after the session watch the recording. I'm just allowing some time for the students to join us. In the meantime, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Natalia. I'm the ICTTF manager. I've been looking after you girls since the enrollment process and all the questions you might had during the course. Was a pleasure to be with you during those 30 days. I know loads of you are enjoying the course. We are getting amazing feedback. Thank you so much. Thank you for spreading the word with your friends, family. And for me, it's a very important initiative. Tomorrow, we are going to have our webinar for Women's Day and celebrate the 2 years anniversary for the boot camp. I think I gave enough time for all of you join us here. Today we are gonna have Paul with us with a presentation followed by Q&A. So please feel free to use the chat to send any questions you might have. If you prefer sending on an email, it's support@icttf.org. So I call Paul to join us, and I will come back later to help with the Q&A. Thank you so much, girls. Enjoy the session. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Natalia, and thank you, and welcome everybody. So I will kick off at some pace here today because we've got quite a bit of material to get through today, and I do want to leave as much time as possible for that all-important interactive Q&A session. A little bit about myself. My background is I've spent over 30 years working in the world of cybersecurity, risk and privacy, working alongside military, law enforcement, and protecting global organizations around the world. And cybersecurity has given me and afforded me an amazing opportunity to travel the world and meet lots of different people and work with lots of different types of organizations. It is an amazing field to work in, and it's something that's very positive in many ways. And we'll talk a little bit about more of that as I go through, because I wanted to use this session as an opportunity to talk about the importance of the cybersecurity industry and those working within it, and why this cybersecurity bootcamp for women, I'm personally very proud of it as well, and why we feel it's so important for people to get involved. So let's look a little bit about the cyber threat landscape and the cyber risk landscape that we all operate in today. So you may remember this slide. It's one of the opening slides in your cybersecurity bootcamp material. And when I first started using that particular slide, it was because what I wanted to do was explain that concept that we kind of live in two worlds. And it's easy to say that, but you need to think about what that means. So in the real physical world, there are laws, there's social norms, and there's consequences. And that world has built up over thousands of years, and people understand society and those social norms within society and rules and laws against stealing, and it's culturally different all around the world, those particular things. But there's a general premise of those things. For example, if you steal, there will be consequences. But the cyber world has accelerated so quickly, especially during COVID, and we have no real choice but to live in both of these worlds. We have to use our phones, the internet, and so on, and to do business and day-to-day activities and businesses and so on. And it's not that it's a bad thing; it's a good thing if done correctly. But it brings along with it a whole different set of situations, if you like. And those situations are, for example, that when we compare and contrast, say, for example, something like theft in both of these worlds. Well, in the real physical world, I need to get access to, if I'm a bad guy, access to what I'm trying to steal. So if I was trying to steal your laptop, I'd need to physically get access to it. I would hope, if I was a bad guy, to steal that laptop and not get seen. But if I was seen, or there was CCTV evidence, there could be an investigation, law enforcement could be involved, and I would face what we refer to as attribution. That's to say that I would face the consequences of that crime. And also, because it's a physical asset, you may have offset the risk, you may have insured the laptop against theft. But when we look at the virtual cyber digital world, it's quite different. Firstly, the bad guy wants access to what's on your laptop, not the laptop. The laptop's only worth a few $100s, a few €100, and they're not that interested in that. But they are very, very interested in the data that's on the laptop or whatever device it is that they're targeting. And the reason being they can sell it multiple times, and it's very, very difficult for them to get caught. That's the reality of the situation. They can operate from anywhere in the world. They can be the far side of the planet, and they can access, and you might not even know that they've stolen it because they may have just copied the data. And these are kind of the factors in the way you have to think about these two different worlds and how we interrelate, that just because there's laws and social norms for the real world, they don't necessarily work effectively or as effectively in the cyber world. And that's part of that cat and mouse game that we have developing. When we look at this infographic, this outlines the kind of the top sort of groups within the cyber threat actor realm and some of their motivations. And I think it's it's interesting to look at the different motivations. And that's what I want you to understand from this, is that there's not just criminals. It's not just organized criminals. It's not just script kiddies working from the bedrooms and doing things for the fun of it and for the kudos and all of that. They have different kinds of motivations. You may have cyber criminals who are doing things for money. You may have nation states who will do it for geopolitical reasons. I'm going to talk a lot about that today. You may have hacktivists doing it for ideological reasons, terrorist groups, thrill seekers, and insiders, all with different motivations. But the reality is there are blurred lines between these groups. So we need to think of this almost like a Venn diagram, that these things are overlapping each other. And your adversary, the person that you're trying to protect your business from, protect your digital assets from, is somewhere in the middle of all of this. So it's a little bit of cyber criminal, a little bit of nation state, and all of these different kind of groups, because they all effectively work together, and they're your adversary. So if you're protecting against cyber criminals, you're also protecting against rogue nation states and so on. And we'll talk about more of that as we go through. And when we talk about cyber threats, some people think is it a virus? Is it ransomware? Is it a nation state? Is it a criminal group? Well, I'd like to think of this, if you think of the concept of a group of blind people walking into a room and they're approaching an elephant, but they don't know what they're approaching. And depending on their perspective, depending on the angle they approach this from, they will think it's something different. So if they come to the rear of the elephant, they might think it's a rope. They might think it's a tree. If they come to the side, they might think it's a wall. From the front, they might think they're dealing with a snake or a spear. That's pretty much what cyber threats are like. Depending on what angle you come at, you think you're dealing with something different. So you might think, oh, I'm dealing with a criminal enterprise here who are trying to make a profit. But you actually find that if you came from a slightly different angle, you're dealing with a nation state who's working alongside those organized criminal actors, and lots of different kinds. And I'll explain more about this as we go through this session. The driving force behind all of this in many cases is money. It's very, very lucrative. It's a surpassed drug trafficking, narcotics as the number one crime, because it's low risk. And there are high returns, and there's an insatiable demand for data. And it's a bit like going to the market. The fresher the produce, the more it's worth. And when we look at these underground exchanges on the dark web and so on, we see the high prices that are being charged for data that is fresh, that it's just been stolen, as opposed to when it goes stale. When it goes off, because and why is that? Well, because people are notified that the data has been stolen. They change their passwords. It becomes less valuable. When it's unknown that it's been stolen, it's very, very useful and valuable information to scam artists, criminals that may use it to do certain things, because nobody's aware those credentials or that data has been stolen or compromised. So this is kind of the old-fashioned game of cat and mouse. We've got good guys and we've got bad guys, and the bad guys, unfortunately, tend to be a little bit ahead all the time, and the good guys are reacting to that and trying to get ahead of the curve. And we see this even now today with things like AI, artificial intelligence, something cool comes out like ChatGPT, and people start thinking how they can use it to make their lives better, to increase their performance in their businesses and so on like that. And criminals just rub their hands and go, here's something we can use. And we can be even better at being cyber criminals by using these kinds of resources. So at all the times, you have the good guys trying to react to that. And when you realize the resources that some of these bad guys have, we have seen situations where ransomware groups are sitting on 30, 40, $50 million in cryptocurrency, sitting on it, not even spending it, because they don't need to. They may be motivated for other reasons, but money is part of that. But if there's a nation state involved, not necessarily the only part of it. And then they can invest when they do into high-end infrastructure and techniques, and hardware and software and people, to help them stay ahead of the cat, in the analogy where the cat is a good guy. So guys, I want to talk a bit today about the concepts of cyber warfare, cyber crime. And I think this presentation that I'm about to go through is a very useful way of us understanding cyber threat actors today, that mixed, blurred lines between criminality, nation states, the different kinds of threats that are out there. It's not just people stealing usernames and passwords. There's a lot of other bad stuff goes on as well. So this is a presentation, or an abstract from a presentation which I delivered some time ago, called "On the Internet, Everywhere is Ukraine." And the headline there is to explain that anywhere can be invaded. You might think you're safe, whether you're an organization, whether you're a country, whether it's your own personal digital ecosystem. It can be invaded from an external source. That's a nice political way of putting it, isn't it? But I might lose my political correctness in the next few slides, but let's see how we get on. So let's talk a little bit about this, because it does make it very relevant to what's going on in the world. And before I start, I am not anti-Russia. I'm anti-war, and what's going on in the Ukraine, obviously very much against that. And the reason, I have a great love for actually Russia. I started my career off in Russia, and if you can zoom in on those photographs, you'll spot me aged 18, 19, 20, thereabouts in my career, when I lived in Kazakhstan and Moscow and places like that, and was starting off my cybersecurity career there. So I have a lot of affection for Russian people in general, and the country. So don't take what I'm saying as I am an anti-Russian person, but you'll get the gist of this, guys. So let's start out where all this sort of cat and mouse stuff come from. It's not all Russians and Americans. This espionage game and secrecy is something that's going on a long, long time. Here's a great example where the Russians delivered a gift. They sent over the scouts over to the embassy. The American embassy went up to Moscow with this lovely gift, which was the American eagle carved onto from wood, and said, here's a lovely gift for you. And it was a gesture of friendship. And for 7 years, by the way, the Americans, of course, took this and went, yeah, sure, we're going to check this out and make sure there's no bugs in it and everything else, and didn't find anything. But after 7 years, they realized that this was hanging in the meeting room, and it was carved out in such a way that it was able to amplify the conversations to the wall. And from the far side of that wall, another building, the Russians were able to pick up the conversations in that room. You can Google this story and find out all the details behind it, but it's just an example that this kind of cat and mouse espionage, secrecy type of activities going on for a long time. We often call it the military technical revolution. And here's another example. It was called Project Gunman in 1984. I believe this is probably the first example of a keystroke logger. Again, the Russians had intercepted the supply chain for the American government, and they had circumvented some of the hardware within the IBM typewriters, these old-fashioned typewriters. And what it meant was, when each of these keys were being hit, they were emitting a particular signal, and that signal was being picked up. And again, they were able to understand what letters were being pressed, what was being typed on the letters. And look, this goes on at all times. That's the point I'm trying to make. And then as we came into the 90s within Russia, and as communism and the Soviet Empire was falling, we have what we call gangster capitalism, which is pretty much there were no jobs. A lot of people, their jobs had disappeared, so they clever people decide, well, we can develop software, we can develop things, and all of this kind of gangster capitalism developed, which was you could pretty much get away with anything in those days in Russia. Hence, some people ended up owning all the oil, all the gas, all that kind of stuff was going on. And what happened was those clever individuals or smart people who were developing software code and what we refer to as crimeware, they were pretty much harbored by the Russian state, and there was unwritten rules between them to say, well, you can operate from here, but you can't attack Russians, and you can't scam Russians or steal Russian credit card data and that kind of stuff. You can do it the rest of the world. But when we need favors, we will want favors from a digital perspective, from a cyber hacking perspective when we need favors. And it was kind of almost a mafia unwritten rule about favors being passed over, and a nod and a wink kind of stuff that was going on. We often refer to this as gangster capitalism, and there's many great books written about that as well that go into great detail on it. Now I'll jump us straight into what we call the fifth domain. And the fifth domain is essentially was a term put together by The Economist magazine over a decade ago. When we're talking about warfare, you have land, sea, air, space, and now cyberspace. And since that term came out, we've seen lots of conscription into cyber command units all around the world. And this is a well-documented area. What often I struggle to understand why people still claim cyber warfare doesn't exist. And there's lots of debates, and lots of experts in the field will say it just doesn't exist. There is no cyber warfare. I'll let you be the judge of that. But let's talk a little bit more about the politics of this. So when we look at geopolitics, is very interrelated with what we see in cyber activity, cyber warfare, criminality activity. So in the first ever summit meeting between Biden and Putin, as there is no Geneva Convention on cyber warfare, these two guys decided that they would draw some red lines between each other, 22 red lines of areas that couldn't be cyber attacked from each other's perspective. And that was effectively, we look at something like the Geneva Convention, it's rules on warfare about, don't bomb ambulances, don't bomb civilian areas, hospitals, those kind of things. The rules of warfare. There is no equivalent for cyber warfare. So this is kind of this understanding that was put between these two entities, these two powers, if you like. And that is because the target for many nations around the world is aiming at controlling what we call the backbone of society, which would be things like the utilities, oil, gas, heat. You don't need to drop bombs on a city to control it. If you can turn off the water, if you can turn off the gas, if you can turn off the electricity, you can undermine the confidence in the government. And we saw this even going on in the Ukraine for quite some time, pre the physical invasion as well. So there's always these aspects of it. And these industrial control systems, these supervisory control and data acquisition systems, such as SCADA-based systems, these are systems that were designed to be resilient, foolproof, but not necessarily secure, and hence they're a huge target for different bad players, shall we say. If we think this doesn't exist, well, this is even pre the Ukraine invasion, where we'd see lots of warnings coming out from regulators and so on around the world. But also what we'd see is in the real physical world, and we talk about this comparison again about the real world and the digital world. So in the real world, we might see a politician in the United States of America saying something negative about Putin, and straight away we would see a cyber attack taking place on an icon of the United States, such as JP Morgan and so on like that. So this is well documented, that relationship between the geopolitics and what happens in the real world and the cyber reaction of that. And it's something I always note when I meet with CISOs and global CISOs of organizations, that if you want to tell the real ones from the not so real ones or the experienced ones, the people that understand politics and what's going on in the world, that's a necessary part these days of being an effective cybersecurity business protection officer at the end of the day. And we see here's just an example from the NCSC in the UK, warning of the increased activity because of the physical real world war that's going on, and the consequences of the cyber skirmishes, aka cyber warfare activity, and that is going on online as well, as part of that. So guys, let me introduce you to this cyber threat actor. His name is Vladimir Putin. This man is powerful. He is resourceful. He's innovative. He's cold, and he's knowledgeable. We would refer to him as a prick. I couldn't help but put that in, guys, but there's so many acronyms in the industry. This is one that might be easier to remember when it comes to dealing with cyber threat actors. And let's see why that is. Well, a cyber threat actor like this is using many different techniques, many different ways and resources to carry out different kinds of nefarious activity. When we look at something like the big lie theory, those who make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. That's from the French philosopher Voltaire. We know the person on the left, but the person on the right here is Goebbels, the Minister of Propaganda of the Nazi Party. And disinformation campaigns and being able to control the narrative, whether it's through TV stations, whether it's online, through social media, these are techniques. We'll talk a little bit about this in further detail in a moment. These are techniques that are used by cyber threat actors. So where did Putin come from? Well, back in the day, we had the oligarchs. These were effectively the kingmakers. These people like Kaczynski and Borowski, they were richer than you can imagine. They owned all the oil, all the gas, and they saw that they wanted to obviously maintain control, maintain their wealth, and they decided what they wanted to do was now control the government of what was coming into power in Russia. So at the time, Yeltsin was in power, and he had a reputation as being a heavy drinker, somewhat unorthodox, and so on. But he held power there, and they needed to get his cooperation of who would be his successor and who would come in and take over. So these guys saw themselves as the kingmaker. So they decided to use the resources to identify who would be the best person to do that. So when we look at people like, for example, here, Paul Manafort was on the rest, who led the campaign for Donald Trump. Paul Manafort was also involved in some of the if you like, PR activities and political campaigning that went on in trying to control the elections in Ukraine. So kind of a birds of a feather, these entities operate on in that sphere at that level of political persuasion. And we see someone like Paul Manafort, who effectively ended up getting arrested, as you may know. But these players are part of this theater of what was going on at the time. And they decided to use the same kind of techniques, the oligarchs. They decided, look, what we do is we will use the rule book of pure campaigning. So let's run some newspaper ads. Let's do some surveys. Let's work out, what do the people want? What would attract them to a new leader? And they realized that overwhelmingly the people of Russia wanted Max Otto von Stierlitz to be their new president, to be their new leader of Russia. But the only problem is, he doesn't exist. He's a fictitious character. He's kind of a James Bond character from a TV program. So what the oligarchs felt was, what they were hearing was, they wanted to find somebody who was kind of a macho character, Secret Service, KGB, and they came across this gentleman, Vladimir Putin, who was working in East Germany at the time, and they earmarked him for the role. Now, nobody had ever heard of Vladimir Putin. Certainly nobody outside of Russia had ever heard of him, and most Russians hadn't heard of him either. So they earmarked him and they groomed him for the position. And he was part of the KGB, which was obviously renamed afterwards to the FSB, and they run elements of the society there, including signal intelligence. I'll talk a little about that in a moment. But at the turn of the millennium in 1999, the 31st December 1999, this was the moment when Yeltsin did not come out to meet his people and wish them Happy New Year and Millennium, they sent out Vladimir Putin. And he was quite a different character compared to who he is now. He was like a mid-level civil servant in an ill-fitting suit who came out I won't say he was bashful, but he certainly wasn't the bravado and the confidence that we see with him now. And this was a moment, and most Russians didn't even know who he was, but that was the power being handed over to him. Now, the GRU is signal intelligence in Russia, and this is the building in Moscow. And this is the equivalent of the GCHQ in the UK, and it's where all the surveillance from a digital perspective is carried out. It's where all the cyber command elements are run from these GRU units that run from buildings like this. And part of that, I talked a little bit about disinformation and so on. We had units like the IRA, the Internet Research Agency. These are also known as the Trolls of Volgino. And this was back in 2008 when they set up an actual college to teach people how to persuade people via blogs, via social media, and so on. And this became like a kind of a mercenary, military-esque element that could be used. Again, getting back to this cooperation between the bad guys and nation states and being able to say, well, look, we need you to do this, we need you to do that. We need to set off a trolling campaign in a foreign country to try and control the elections or whatever it happens to be. These were the kind of resources that are being built up under the control and power of Vladimir Putin as well. So when we look at some of the aliases, this is like get your mind back to that elephant of the blind people going into the room and looking at the elephant from different perspectives. So when we see things like, oh, that was Fancy Bear APT28, or that was Black Energy, or that was Voodoo Bear, or that was Pawn Storm, or Goosefur, whatever it's to be. They're all the same thing. They're all the same elephant. They're the GRU. They're all part of it. They're just different campaigns and different elements and different facades that they run when they're involved in campaigns. And these are some of the major cyber operations that you may have heard of. There's Bad Rabbit, the World Anti-Doping Agency attacks, NotPetya, DNC attacks, the Chemical Weapons Watchdog, well documented with a physical world element of espionage and that kind of activity, as well as the cyber element of what was going on as well. So I'm going to pick on one of those, which is the Petya and NotPetya attack that comes from. So first of all, just need to explain the difference between Petya and NotPetya. So Petya was a piece of ransomware, so crimeware, a piece of software designed to carry out crime, and ransomware software that kidnaps your data and you pay a ransom to get it back. In theory, NotPetya was made to look like it was ransomware, but effectively was not. And I'll uncover a little bit about that now. So let's take a deep dive into NotPetya. So here's one of the differences. Ransomware will, in theory, kidnap your data and not give you access to data until you pay a ransom to get the kidnapped data back. But NotPetya was designed to destroy. It was a weapon of mass destruction. So it was akin to going into a library and going to all the index cards and destroying all the index cards and then shredding all of the books, because that's how it attacked the systems. It destroyed the file allocation tables, the indexing of where the files were, and then it shredded all of the files so there'd be no data left whatsoever. Now, around this time, the world had just dodged a bullet with an attack known as WannaCry. And WannaCry, there was a security researcher who found a way, kind of accidentally, into what we call the kill chain and stopping that from spreading. And it had hit the National Health Service in the UK. It was starting to spread around the world. And this security researcher had found that by registering a certain domain, he was able to stop it actually operating. So the world had just got through this. People were aware of all of this was happening, going, whoa, that was pretty crazy cyber stuff. And there's often a psychological disconnect between what people perceive as reality and the sexiness of the cybersecurity world. And I think, really, is that really happening? Yes, it's really happening. So on June the 27th, 2017, in Ukraine, there's a small company called MEDoc. And they had developed a piece of software for small to medium businesses, mainly in Ukraine, as most of their customers are there. And it was equivalent of like Quicken or TurboTax, or one of these sort of SME, Zero, whatever, one of these small accounting packages that SMEs use, small to medium enterprises use. And all of a sudden, they started getting phone calls from customers, and they seemed to be having issues, and they were experiencing some issues themselves. And well, what was happening? What was happening was NotPetya was spreading across Ukraine. It took down one particular bank in 45 seconds. This was so virulent, designed just to spread really, really quickly and destroy everything on all of the systems, and actually like a worm, so it went and spread from one system to another as it went through. This gentleman here, Pavlo Bondarenko, was working in the health service, a young guy who spotted his instincts were, this is doing something completely different. This isn't about money. This isn't about ransomware. This is literally doing something completely different. So he contacted his boss's boss's boss and said, we need to switch everything off and protect the data. It's after the data. But by 6 p.m., before everything was switched off, because they did listen to him, they did respond, the health sector, 4 hospitals were out of action, 6 power companies, 4 airports, 22 banks, ATMs weren't working. The entire federal government had been affected. 300 companies had lost all of their data. And they estimate at least 10% of all the data was wiped out of the country, Ukraine. That's phenomenal. 10% of the data wiped, completely gone. It then moved on, and because it didn't care, this weapon of mass destruction, if you like, and was destroying data, and it then hit Chernobyl. And what we're looking at there in that big building, there's 200 tons of uranium. They only had 7 minutes to turn off over 1,000 machines that protect that uranium from taking out the rest of us, so whoever released this, whoever's responsible for releasing this weapon, and the tactics it took, didn't care that the software wouldn't understand about borders or anything like that, and would just keep going and just keep going. There were global victims, some big names, and even FedEx, Merck, Nuance, and so on. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Merck, the global shipping company, $1 billion operation, and they had the ME doc software installed, a trial version of it, on one machine, on one workstation in Odessa in Ukraine. Now, let's think of how far that is away from Port Elizabeth that we're looking at here in New York. But within a few hours, what we're dealing with was this. Tailback's physical impact of this meant that all of their systems had been infected, and the systems were not working to allow the trucks and the cargo in or out of Port Elizabeth, and this tailback was going on for miles, causing traffic jams and mayhem right across New York City itself. And the police turning up just telling them to turn around and go off because they couldn't come in. All Maersk could do was post this on their website saying, we're sorry, but were temporarily unavailable. And they had lots of resources, lots of experts and to help them out with all of this. And they got over 300 of them together in their head office in Maidenhead in the UK. And they essentially wrote a blank check to a large consultancy firm, one of the big 4, and said, we don't care what it takes, just get everything back. So they hired all the experts from around the world. They got all this together. They started trying to rebuild everything. But then they realized that part of their business continuity plan, part of their contingency plans and everything else was that their Active Directory servers would replicate. That is to say that they had 260 odd servers around the world for this global company, and the Active Directory, which controlled who accesses what and where, the rules, if you like, of their entire system, if it were just replicating each other. So when one was destroyed, that destroyed data was replicating on top of everything else. So as they were able to get back local workstations and devices, they were realizing, oh, we're screwed. We're not able to get everything else back. But then they realized in Ghana, in Africa, one tiny office had a power outage, and their Active Directory server was still the original one with all the rule base and everything on it. So they said, that's great. Let's replicate up from that. But the internet bandwidth was not strong enough. They said, that's okay. Let's get the hard drive and get it sent up to us in Maidenhead, and we'll go from there. But nobody had work permits. So they had to create this relay race right across Africa where some people came from the UK and met somebody in Nigeria, and the people from Ghana went to Nigeria, handed over the hard drive and went back, and then they were able to get the Active Directory. So kind of seeded the path, scary stuff, I'm sure you'll agree. Now, after this, the CEO put a brave face in this. He said they'd spent 350 million. They would now make cybersecurity a competitive advantage. But the reality is that pre this attack, they had lots of Windows 2000 servers in place that had not been patched. So they were saying one thing but doing another in practice. And one of the reasons we feel that was because they hadn't linked people's bonuses and their KPIs all around cybersecurity either. So where people were incentivized to do better jobs, they weren't incentivized to be better at doing cybersecurity in their everyday jobs as well. And that was one lesson to be learned out of that. This is Tom, and Tom in the Department of Homeland Security estimated that the cost was at least 10 billion across the world. That's a very conservative figure. I think we'll all agree. And then back at our little company, back at ME Doc in the Ukraine, they got a knock on the door from the police because it turns out that they were patient zero. They were the first, they were the delivery mechanism for this malware. What had happened was their software update system had been compromised by the bad guys and was used in order to disseminate. So the bad actor, the person behind this, wanted a way to affect as many businesses and the backbone of the economy and so on in Ukraine. So they decided this was their method and this is how they would do it. And there's the servers there in their server room. Now the world reacted to this and they called it out and they said, well, look, and not just for this attack, but for lots of other ones that we've seen going along over time. And here we have the response from the UK, and with similar responses from the United States as well, all calling out that the fingerprints on a lot of these attacks are the GRU at the end of the day. And this kind of political reaction of trying to issue arrest warrants, if you like, for military personnel in other countries. We've seen this as a tactic. We're calling out people part of maybe Unit 61398 or the People's Liberation Army in China or Russians or whatever it happens to be. But there is this quasi-existence of cyber mercenaries and expert cyber criminal actors operating in those areas that are used, and they don't necessarily have a uniform on either. So here are some of the campaigns that we mentioned that they're part of. The French elections, where business and critical infrastructure were affected by NotPetya. We had the Pyongyang Olympics, the Novichok poisoning. These are all campaigns related to the GRU as well. Closer to home, from my own home during COVID, our whole entire health service was taken down by a group called the Conti ransomware group. That's the Conti ransomware group who, on the day that the Russians invaded Ukraine, put up on their website that they offered Vladimir Putin their full support. It's a group with only 62 staff members that make about $180 million a year. And we have seen those links subsequently between them and the GRU and Putin. So at the very top, we have Putin controlling the FSB controlling GRU, the GRU behind all of these campaigns. So this is our chain back to the bad actor, cyber threat actor. And when we look at this, is it criminality? Is it warfare, or is it terrorism? And you can see these murky terms and these blurred lines between these areas. And that's why it's so important for all of us to be able to understand what we're really dealing against a lot of the time is cyber evil. And in a lot of the courseware material we talk about, we use real life cases that are very dark and sinister to illustrate the importance of the good work you do when you work in the area of cybersecurity, because you are protecting the world from bad actors, whether they are trafficking human beings, whether they're selling stolen organs online, whether they're stealing data or stealing pension funds, whatever it happens to be. It's all nefarious bad actor activity. So I believe, and I'm going as quickly as I can, guys, because I know I'm speaking quite quickly, but you will be able to get a recording of this. But I am, because I want to leave as much time as I can to interact with you on the questions. So the most effective weapon we can deal with this, guys, is by empowering the people that work in our organizations and giving them the confidence and the competence to be able to deal with cyber threats. When, Al-Qaeda was at its full tilt and anybody would be going through an airport, if they saw an unattended bag, and even to this day, if you see an unattended bag, there's a visceral response. That doesn't look right. I need to do something about it. Everybody, as part of the community, takes part of that responsibility. That's what we need when it comes to cybersecurity, to stop these bad actors doing what they do. And they devastate people's lives. They really do. And can't fit all of that in 1 hour, but there's lots of evidence to that as well. And it's about converging these two worlds of physical security and cyber security, and what binds those two together, which is regulatory compliance, legal, all of those kind of areas as well. And the world needs what we call business protection officers. These are people that it might not be their full-time job to be, for example, a chief information security officer. They may be head of procurement or head of AML or head of a business division within their organization. But if they're enabled and empowered to understand cyber risks and have that confidence and competence, they will be able to protect the business from that point of view. Now, at the other end of the spectrum here, and I mentioned CISOs, chief information security officers, because talent is so hard to find in the world of cybersecurity. Talent being, if you think of it like a pyramid, at the bottom end of that pyramid, the wider part of it, there's lots of up-and-coming technical talent and talent around, for example, things like pen testing and those kind of areas, and engineering around cybersecurity. But as you go further up that pyramid towards the top, the people that understand how businesses operate, the legal, the compliance, all those pieces, they become rarer and rarer. So when it comes to finding a CISO that understands how banks operate or how an aviation company operates, how to protect the assets, how to empower the business and develop a cyber strategy that supports the business strategy of that particular business, they are rare commodities. They are unicorns. And hence why there are lots of jobs now in the 7-figure area because they're so rare to find people like this. So it's a very rewarding career path to be on for many, and especially even right up to the boardroom level, non-exec directors and so on like that. And we've seen lots of different people get involved from that perspective as well. So I want to talk to you a little bit about that and how you might want to go beyond this cybersecurity bootcamp, because I believe the answer lies within the organizations. It's the people that work for, love and care for that organization and the impact that something from a cyber devastation point of view would have, that want to protect it, are the best people to protect your organization, not necessarily external consultants. So let me talk you through very quickly through the contents or the curriculum and the syllabus of the CCRS courses. It's also part of the CCRO course as well. Starts off, and you've gone through this understanding the cyber risk landscape. We then move on to understanding cyber strategy requirements, how to align those up with the business, and then move on to an area known as CRQ, cyber risk quantification, understanding how to create meaningful metrics, how to produce KPI, key performance indicators, KRIs, key risk indicators, how to tie those back to the business so the business will understand the importance of the cybersecurity and cyber risk measures that have been taken, and be able to make those decisions, those risk management based decisions, accept, mitigate, transfer, whatever it happens to be. We also have a module on cyber leadership and culture, how policy affects culture and how to attract talent within the organizations. We have a module that focuses totally around cyber risk and the law, regulatory compliance from a global perspective, and understand how that harmonization challenge is there and how it's updated all the time. Everything from privacy laws to regulations, EU strategies, all and indeed international side of things as well, all covered off in that module. And then there's a module on cyber resilience and incident management. So cyber resilience is if you like, the concept of being able to detect an attack, be able to respond, to be able to recover. So it's not the whole concept of, oh, we'll just keep making things more secure, and things will never happen. It's being able to recover effectively, cyber resilience, and then how to handle incidents and incident management. We have a module on third-party cyber risk and remote workers. So handling suppliers, the supply chain, remote workers, especially through COVID and post-COVID era. And then putting it all together, the course runs right through to develop a cyber strategy and perform an assessment on a fictitious bank and leverage things like the NIST cybersecurity framework. So just thought I'd take those couple of minutes to share the outline of that with you. And that's because we want you guys to become cyber leaders. We want you to go beyond what you've achieved already within the cybersecurity bootcamp. And we want you to be able to gain more knowledge, to be able to become part of that solution. And to be able to do that, we're going to help you on your journey with that piece as well, because we have these different offerings. We have a certified cyber specialist, cyber risk officer, and a NIST cybersecurity expert course. So these are different streams or paths you can go on, or you may want to combine those paths. So what we're going to provide to you today, guys, as a way of appreciation and congratulations for passing the course and making way through it, is that we're offering these special offers. Now, I will step away from it at that point, because I know Natalia will be able to help you guys on what's the best package for you if it's something you want to follow up on and to progress on. but I will note that they are there, and you can see there's significant discounts for those of you who do want to follow on a journey with their education. But at that point, Natalia, I think I've left enough time for some questions. I have, like, so all
Thank you
good. So
so
I'll hand over
much,
to you.
Paul.
No problems.
Thank you so much, Paul. Just before entering the questions, I will follow up with you girls if you want to keep going with your cybersecurity learning journey. As Paul said, we are offering those special prices. We really want you to grow in the career. So bear with me and me, you go through all those details. Most of the questions I'm getting, Paul, and I think I will resume all of them so we have enough time.
Mhm.
It's where do I start? Like we have people from different levels in the course. Some of them are in entry level, and with the course they are eager to start. As you mentioned, there are plenty of opportunities out there. So, what do you recommend? What are the next step? Like I know we have the courses; they can also do the courses. But the other thing is, only with the courses can I get a job? It's the question that I'm getting all the time. So can you give us a little bit of advice regarding to the starting career, maybe progressing in the career for those who already work in cybersecurity?
Yeah, absolutely, Natalia. So education is one part of what you're trying to do, but and backing yourself on an education path. And let's say, for example, something like the CCRS or the NCSC, that will gain you a huge amount of knowledge very quickly. But what employers want to see is that you've applied that knowledge in some way. So going through courses like that, certainly they're very beneficial and you get a huge amount of knowledge. But what I have found is that the key to success in the cybersecurity industry is building a human network, and doing that through the community, doing that through different groups. There's that physical world again. You've got the cyber world and the physical world, and you need to turn up to security events. You need to network with your peer groups. At the end of the day, humans do business with humans, and if they can build a relationship or an understanding of who you are from an ethical point of view as well, you will find the doors open for you. And that's a top tip. I mean, it's hiding behind a LinkedIn profile and just sending out emails to people will only get you so far, or trying to recruit through an agency. But if people meet you at events, they get to talk to you, they will ask that next question. And this advice isn't so much about cyber, it's just real world advice, is that building those relationships and making those contacts, and maybe volunteering with the likes of organizations like the ICTTF and others around the world, gives you a chance to prove you're able to do things. So you've got something to point at and say, well, look, I've done this. It also gives you referenceability. And there's lots of organizations or charities in your own countries that I'm sure can't afford cybersecurity people and will be very grateful for someone to come in, maybe write policies for them, maybe do a pen test for them, whatever it happens to be, and help them out in that cybersecurity space. And that gives you referenceability. So now you have experience, and you're getting closer to doors being open. So that's my advice for people at the very start of the career. One of the great things about the cybersecurity industry is it's a meritocracy. So by that I mean it's about your merits. Can you do the job? So there's 2 points of how you prove to somebody you can do the job. One, you prove you've got the knowledge, and two, you prove you've done it. So I know it's a kind of a chicken and egg situation sometimes. That's why I mean by you need to just get those doors open for you to be able to prove you have done this work. And there's such a delta, a gap, a vacuum of skilled people in this area that you won't have difficulty getting doors open for you. You really won't, if you're presenting yourself in the right way, with your education, with your career objectives, with your acumen and your enthusiasm. You will be right at the top of the pile, and that's what people want to hire them. There are lots of open jobs out there. There really are. There's lots of career prospects, and to get someone to give you a chance if you're at the start of your career is really about that human element of trying to interact a little bit better. So, for me, maybe I'm old school at this stage, guys, but it's the physical end of things, meeting people at events, meeting people, even chatting with them informally on Zoom calls and things like that. Even that side of it, it just breaks down those barriers, and people go, "Oh, that person seems to know what they're talking about." I've hired people from these courses because they've been so good, and I've reached out to them, and some of them become ambassadors for ICTTF and so on like that, because we've just gone, "Wow, that person's really, really good." And as a human that's hiring resources all the time, you're going, yeah, that's exactly the kind of talent I need. So you get a chance to shine. But there are lots of options out there.
Thank you so much, Paul. I'm getting loads of positive feedback here in the Q&A. All the girls, like you are a great tutor. Was so easy to learn from you. I'm eager to learn more. What is next? So, in terms of what is next, I believe Paul have said a little bit. I will follow up with the courses if you want to. You can also send me an email for info@icttf.org, and I can follow up there. I will just direct more like technical questions. So the career stuff we can follow up with the students later. So Paul, I have a good question here. Is a master in management required if my aim for my future is CISO? I know CISO is one side of the profession you are passionate.
Yeah. Okay. So a CISO is a very special role, a chief information security officer. Sometimes they're called different things in different organizations, but the characteristics of a really good CISO is that they're a people person, that they are somebody that is a natural leader, somebody that is a strong communicator, a collaborator. Okay. And I haven't mentioned anything about cybersecurity knowledge yet, because actually the best CISOs I've ever met aren't necessarily the most technical people. They are people that understand how the business operates, and they're people that understand people. Because to be effective as a CISO, you need to have that political aspect, that you can cajole and work with different types of groups. You need to be as comfortable in the boardroom as you are in the server room. You don't necessarily need to understand everything that's going on in those rooms, but you need to understand how to get the best out of people and be effective in that space. So it's the content and curriculum of a CISO can certainly be learnt. And we talk about this in the CCRS course as well, and the CISO course, about 4 different levels of CISOs. And when we look at a level 4, they're the kind of $1 million CISOs that are out there, and they will have all the management skills and the acumen and the charisma and all those kind of things that make someone a very special CISO. But the world needs lots of other CISOs as well, CISOs who are very effective at the job and may not have all of that. So I wouldn't be put off if I haven't described you with the communication skills and the sales skills, because it's, when I say sales skills, you're selling ideas, you're selling your opinion all the time. If you're shy, meek, and you're more comfortable in a server room than you are in dealing with people, you're never going to be a level 4 CISO until you break that. And I know it's very hard for people to believe what I'm about to tell you, but I was very shy at the start of my career, and it's something I had to beat, or I wouldn't have been able to progress with my career. And and then I became a public speaker and yada 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 and all those kind of things. But that's something I had to work on, because I had the subject matter expertise, but I wasn't able to get into the boardroom, wasn't able to get those opportunities, because I was essentially a geek, and I was doing lots of really cool cybersecurity stuff from a technical point of view and engineering point of view all around the world. But I wanted to get into the business side as well. So it's about navel gazing and looking at yourself and understanding where your strengths and weaknesses are, and developing those weaknesses into strengths, as certainly I did in my career, from the point of view becoming a communicator and all of those good things. And that's what I would say to anybody on their career path. But look at your strengths, and play to your strengths, because we're not all looking for the same kind of CISOs everywhere. It is a very human job, and people who are great communicators. I read some articles recently around some surveys that were done about, why women are great in cybersecurity and all those kind of things, and from the multitasking perspective, from the communication prospect. But look, a lot of it can boil down to this. There's a machismo to the IT world, and it's often illustrates itself and comes out as people using acronyms and trying to be the smartest in the room by just talking acronyms all the time, all that kind of stuff, right? I personally, in my experience, when I'm in a room, and I don't get that from I don't feel women feel the need to do that and try and intimidate through knowledge and those kind of areas. So I'm speaking broadly here, so don't attack me, please. Right? And therefore, I do find when there's a wider realm of subject matter, such as there is in the world of cybersecurity and cyber risk, that women are much better at it, on taking a holistic view and taking the non-combative view of dealing with those situations that are part of the role on a day-to-day basis, which is communication, so on. Now, you can pick up on little pieces that I say then, so I don't agree with this, don't agree with that. Here's the bottom line. When we started off the Cyber Risk Academy, and the first course we brought out was called a CCRO course. And the assignments would come in, they're anonymized and so on. But very quickly, as we went through and we got to engage with the students and so on, we realized that the female students were here and the male students were here. And hence, the Cybersecurity Bootcamp for Women was born, because we said, we have to do something. There's all of this talent, all these amazing people that want to work in this place, and they just seem to be better at this area. And I'm not qualified enough from a psychological point of view to understand why they are, but it's the bottom line. So so I think there's lots of career options and paths there, depending on what strain you want to go down, the technical piece or the non-technical piece. You don't necessarily need to be technical or highly technical. I was at the start of my career, but that's why those courses, the way we've developed them, is to give people enough confidence to push back at the technical BS that people often portray and comes across as an intimidation tactic in meetings and things like that, and people are afraid to ask the next question. But when you understand the concepts and you're able to, the fundamentals, you are best armed and best placed to be able to tackle people presenting information and be able to scratch the surface and find out whether somebody's, presenting BS or actually presenting something that makes sense to the business and so on. So hopefully that's some useful nuggets there.
Thank you so much, Paul. Our Q&A chat is blowing, but unfortunately we won't have time to answer everyone. I'm getting loads of questions about the courses, the payments, price. Girls, we don't want to turn this in a sales pitch. So as I said, you follow up with you. You have my mail, and I can more than happy to support you there. Paul mentioned that we have a couple of students that have been supporting ICTTF, became ambassadors, and tomorrow for Women's Day and to celebrate, as I mentioned in the beginning, 2 years anniversary for the bootcamp, we have the Embrace Equity Time with Women in Cyber webinar. We have Anika Bryan and John Carroll, two of our fellows students who have developed a lot after the course. So they will also talk about career, all that you girls are asking Paul and asking me, what is next? How do I progress? What can I do to get a career in cybersecurity? They will also be answering this, and from the female side point of view. Paul, it's great pushing this, but we know when it comes woman to woman, makes us feel more comfortable. So, Paul, I really appreciate your time to be here with us today and all of the students. Do you have any final comments for us?
No, just I would say, obviously, I can see there's a lot of questions after coming in there. And guys, what we'll do is we will go through those afterwards and try and respond to as many as we can. But as Natalia says, you can reach out to Natalia and the team to help you with any of the the options around courses and so on. My final words will probably be around, look, guys, you got to remember to back yourself in life when it comes to career choices and where we are. The cybersecurity industry itself, Google anything around the growth of the industry and the importance of it. I've talked about some of the topics here today about why we need it as human beings to protect our way of life, whether it's from political point of view, whether it's from different bad actors, people that are attacking people. I did a TV program recently on Valentine's Day around the whole thing about people's lives being devastated around romance scams. If you want to do something worthwhile with your life and your career, then protecting people from bad people and evil things is a good choice to do. It gives me a reason 30 years on in my career to still bounce out of bed, get in, innovate, do things, and have that energy to be able to go through those things, because it's a very worthwhile profession to be in. But find your niche. Start broad, and that's why those courses are broad, because they give you a little taste of everything right across. You might say, I'm into compliance, or I'm into AML, or I'm into pen testing, or I'm into incident response, and you will find your natural path within the industry. It's holistically quite wide, and it's very interesting, and you need to be a lifelong learner to really make the most of it. So my final few words on that, guys, and I thank you so much for your time. As I say, we will do our best to follow up with everything in the Q&A piece, and hopefully you can all join Natalia tomorrow as well for that webinar. Always going to be very useful. Thank you, everybody. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye bye, Paul. Thank you, girls. I'm looking forward to see you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye bye.